continue on from last week. We cover up to chapter 22. So we're gonna start reading from chapter 23. Chapter 23 is about the oracles concerning the Tyre and Sidon. And we're going to talk a little more about this one, but I want you to just kind of try to read carefully with this chapter 23, and I will explain why. So let me just read the verse first. Wail, O ships of Tarshish, for Tyre is laid waste, without house or harbor. From the land of Cyprus it is revealed to them. Be still, O inhabitants of the coast. The merchants of Sidon, who cross the sea, have filled you, and on many waters your revenue was the grain of Shihor, the harvest of the Nile. You were the merchants of the nations. Be ashamed, O Sidon, for the sea has spoken, the stronghold of the sea, saying, I have neither labored nor given birth. I have neither reared young man nor brought up young woman. When the report comes to Egypt, they will be in anguish over the report about Tyre. Cross over to Tarshish, wail, O inhabitants of the coast. Is this your exultant city, whose origin is from days of old, whose feet carried a herd to settle far away? Who has purposed this against Tyre, the bestowrer of crowns, whose merchants were princes, whose traders were the honors of the earth? The Lord of hosts has purposed it, to defile the pompous pride of all glory, to dishonor all the honor of the earth. Cross over your land like the Nile, O daughter of Tarshish. There is no restraint any more. He has stretched out his hand over the sea. He has shaken the kingdoms. The Lord has given command concerning Canaan to destroy the strongholds. And he said, you will no more exult. O oppressed virgin daughter of Sidons, arise, cross over to Cyprus. Excuse me. Even there you will have no rest. Behold, the land of the Chaldeans. This is the people that was not Assyrian, destined for wild beast. They erected their siege towers. They stripped her palace bare. They made her a ruin. Wail, O ship of Tarshish, for your stronghold is laid waste. In that day Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years, like the days of one king. At the end of the 70 years it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the prostitute. Take a harp, go about the city of forgotten prostitute. Make sweet melodies, sing many songs, that you may be remembered. At the end of the 70 years the Lord will visit Tyre, and she will return to her wage, and will prostitute herself with all the kingdoms of the world on the face of the earth. Her merchandise and her wage will be holy to the Lord. It will not be stored or hoarded, but her merchandise will supply abundant food and fine clothing for those who dwell before the Lord. Okay. So when you actually read, you don't really find anything interesting or anything that stands out, of course. And most of the people, if someone reads Isaiah, probably not going to pay much of attention for the things that they're reading in chapter 23. One of the things that you have to really understand is, first of all, does anyone know where the Sidon and Tyre is? Does anyone know where that is, place? most of the people really don't pay attention to when you hear the cities or when you hear the people, the towns. People don't really pay attention, right? So who cares about what this place is? So let me actually show you the maps of this place. And as a matter of fact, that we did actually talked about the Sidons in the past. You might not actually remember. But do you know who came from Sidon that you know? Anyone? No, it's not in Lebanon. Just in the old days in the Bible, do you remember any things that happened in Sidon? No? There's some interesting story that we read about Sidon in the past. Of course, for those of the people who haven't really participated in our Bible sharing, obviously they will not know. But for those of the people who actually been hearing this Bible sharing with me, should heard about the Sidon. But even you actually participate in a Bible sharing, unless you really pay attention, you may not even remember. Let's just take a quick look at what happened in the past. Let's go to First King. And this is something that I actually did explain as I was actually going over the story. First King. Let's go to chapter 16. First King chapter 16. We're going to read from verse 29. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, the son of Omri, began to reign over Israel. Ahab, the son of Omri, reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. And as if it had been a light things for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served the Baals and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. And Ahab made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. In his days, Hiel of Bethel built Jericho. He laid its foundations at the cost of Abiram, his firstborn, and set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Joshua the son of Nun. All right. So, we are hearing about a king, Ahab, which was the king of Samaria, which is in Israel. And he is one of the bad kings in Israel. And you probably heard about the king Ahab, the story of Elijah and Ahab, and he's false prophets and they were competing against each other, who's going to be the real God, by setting up the altar at the Mount of Carmel. And eventually God brought the fire from heaven to burn up the altars. You know that story, right? But Ahab, the king, was married to a woman from Sidon. Her name is Jezebel. She is one of the notorious, the queens of Israel, who had done all these bad things to Israel, because she brought all kinds of idolatry to Israel, because that's what she were used to. When she was raised in Sidon, all she saw was the worshiping idols, Asherah, Baals. So when she came and married to Ahab, she brought all kinds of adultery to Israel, and not only poisoned her husband, which is Ahab, and also all the people of Israel been poisoned through her. So, from God's perspective, she is one of the key person who really ruined the land of Israel, to lead Israelites to worship the idols and Baals and Asherah. So from God's perspective, what should he do to this Jezebel and the country who brought all this adultery? What do you think God should do with this? Do you think God has good feelings for Sidonians, who brought all this to... Yeah. God does not have a good feelings for Sidonians, because they're the one who ruined his own people, Israel. Right? So he should not have any good feelings for them. But interestingly, God actually brought Elijah. Elijah was there, which was the prophet, and he was the one who was actually speaking to Ahab and all the people of Israel, and people would not listen. So what he did was he prayed, and for 3.5 years, rain did not come down on Samaria. You know that old story, right? So people suffered for 3.5 years. But what did they do when God actually stopped raining on the land? Did they return to the Lord? Did they repent? When you read the story, they did not. Starting from Ahab, Jezebel, all the people of Israel, they never returned to the Lord, even though God gave them a warning. Now, what should God do then? But when you look at the story, chapter 17, it talks about the drought, and God is not raining down on anything. And then right after that, let's start reading from chapter 17, verse 8. The word of the Lord came to him, "Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow thereof feed you." So he rose and went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a widow was there gathering sticks. And he called to her and said, "Bring me a little water in a vessel, that I may drink." And as she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, "Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." And she said, "At the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked only a handful of flour in a jar and little oil in a jug. And now I am gathering a couple of sticks, that I may go in, prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. And Elijah said to her, Do not fear, go and do as you have said, but first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterward make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth. And she went and did as Elijah said, and she and he and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not spent, neither did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. Don't you think it is kind of weird? The whole thing started because of the woman who came from Sidon. Why did God send Elijah to Sidon, where it was originated? The sin, adultery, started off from the country of Sidon and carried over to Israel. And they're the one who was actually ruined all of God's people. Why would God send Elijah over to Sidon? And he met a woman, a widow woman with a son, and she got nothing to eat. Isn't that kind of weird story? Why would God send Elijah to a woman who doesn't even have a food to eat? If God is going to send someone out there, especially Elijah, why wouldn't God send Elijah to a woman or a family or someone who abundantly rich and be able to actually give a food that Elijah need? But instead, God sent Elijah to a woman who has nothing to eat. So what she was going to do it is, she only have small portions of a flour in a jar, right, in a jug, and then she has little oils. So she was going to eat the last meal for herself and for her son, and she was going to eat this and die after that because there's nothing to eat. When Elijah was sent there, what Elijah is saying is even horrendous, because what he's saying is, oh, give me the bread. What bread? They don't have a flour. They only have a small portions of flour for themselves. There's no other food to share. And Elijah is saying, giving it to me. Once you give it to me, whatever is left over, if there's any more food left over for you, and then eat. If someone comes to you, asks this question, what would you say? Would you say, oh, I will make some flour, I'll go to the kitchen and bake for you. But I don't have anything to eat. That's okay. We're just going to die. Is that what you're going to say? What would you do? Well, certainly that's not the answer you're going to give to Elijah. All right? So first of all, God sent Elijah to Sidon, which is not even Israel, right? Which has got nothing to do with God, right? So intentionally, God sent Elijah to Zarephath, which is in Sidon. And then Elijah is asking her to give everything what you have. Give it to me first. Once you give up your food, then your flours in a jar and oil will never dry. Never, it will always be there for you to eat. So the first thing that woman has to do is give up what she has. It's like when she give up the last flour, last oil, it's like giving up her life, because that's the last meal that she could have. So giving up everything she has. It's like, I am going to deny myself. I am going to die. Once she did that, she didn't ask any question. She just baked the bread and gave it to Elijah. Does she know anything about Elijah? Does she know anything about the God that Elijah believed? No, she doesn't know anything about Elijah or the God of Israel. Does she care? She doesn't. Why? Because, first of all, she's not Israelite. And second, in the land of Sidon, what they worship is Baal and Azra, not the God of Israel. So she doesn't care about the God that Elijah believes. But she didn't ask any question whatsoever. She gave up everything she had. She denied herself. It's like she died at that moment. And when she gave everything to Elijah, what happened to her? Her flour and oil was always there for them to eat until all this drought is over. What is the name of Elijah? What does the name means Elijah? Well, Elijah, so there's El, there is a Jah, which means Yah. El means God. Yah means Yahweh. So, what does that mean? Elohim is Yahweh, right? God is the Lord. When you look at this picture, that's exactly the story of the salvation. And then the woman giving up herself is giving her life, and she's actually decided to die first to receive a life. Think about it. When God delivered the Israelites out of Egypt, and then when they reached to the Red Sea, what did God say to the Israelites? What are you doing? Walk into the water. Walking to the water means you die. Because God did not separate the water. Right? And when God said, walk into the water, that means you die. So they thought this is the way to die. Jumping into the Red Sea is the way to die. But when they jumped into the water, what happened? Water separated. And that what they believed is the path to death, it is opened the door and opened the path to the life. Which means the first step as a believer, we have to die first. We have to give up ourselves first in order to receive the life. That is the process that we go through when we believe we receive the baptism. I'm not talking about the water sprinkle baptism I'm talking about. I'm talking about immersion, which is you actually dip yourself into the water and then coming out of the water. What does that really mean? You die. When you go under the water, you die. And then when you come out, now you receive a new life. That's what the baptism means. When you look at the story of the Bible, it's always a start with darkness, death. That's the first step. So, darkness, leads to light. Death leads to life. Right? That's the process that you always see. That's the same patterns across the board. So the Sidon is the place where God should destroy, because they're the source of all this idolatry of Israelites. So instead of God destroying the Sidonians, or the Sidon, or the Tyre, but God sent Elijah to open the door for them to be saved, especially for this woman. And as I mentioned, women represent Israel in Old Testament. Women represent church in New Testament. I mentioned that several times. Right? So this woman being saved is like pagan, which is Gentiles, being saved, when Israelite is being punished. So how did the gospel spread out to the world outside of Israel? Because Israel did not believe in Jesus Christ. And all the disciples are spread out around the world, and they started to preach to the Gentiles. That's how we receive the gospel, and that's how we come to believe in Jesus. Otherwise, we would never even know who Jesus is. So, Sidon, it is the evil, the source of the evil. So keep that in mind, all right? Reason I actually reference this story is because this is related. So coming back to Isaiah for a sec. Isaiah. So Tyre and Sidon. So let's take a look at the map first. Unfortunately, this map, it is not so great. There's no story of any other people besides this woman in the Bible. This map, it is not really... Okay, let's use this one. You see my screen? So this is south of Judah, right here, the below. This is the Dead Sea, right? This is the Sea of Galilee, and this is the Jordan River, right? So in the map, what you see in green color is land of Israel, which is the north of Israel, right? And then what you see purple color at the bottom, this is the land of Judah, right? And when you go all the way up here, you see this Tyre, and you see this Sidon, and what is it called? Phoenicia. Phoenicia is where this Sidon and Tyre. So these two, Sidon and Tyre, are the biggest city of the Phoenicia. So you will hear all the time Tyre and Sidon. So this is the upper part of Israel. So so this is a Samaria, as you can see here, right? You see this? Do you see my mouse here? Samaria. This is Samaria, and he, which is Elijah, was sent to all the way up here, to Sidon. From Samaria, all the way up to Sidon right here. It's a long way, right? It's a long way. God intentionally sent him all the way over to Sidon. All right? So at least you understand where the Sidon and Tyre is. Now I'm going to show you what the Tyre looks like. Let me stop my sharing. Today, it is upper part of the left side of the Lebanon. As that is correct. So let me show you. Okay, so this is actually a small map, but at least you can see. You see, this is the map. So this is a Phoenicia area, but when you look at the area, this is Tyre. So Tyre is actually not the city on this land. This is a small island, not even attached to. When you look at the previous map, it looked like the Tyre was actually in the land side. It is not in the land side. It is actually small islands outside of this land area. Okay? Sidon, on the other hand, is all the way go up and on the land side, but not the Tyre. Tyre is small island. So, because the Tyre is a small island and it is kind of separate from the land, Tyre, in the old and ancient time, what happened was this is the most famous and the sea-born city, meaning that this is where all the ship is coming and all the traders are coming in to trade. All the imports are coming in, all the exports are going in, so there's lots of merchants coming into Tyre to either sell or buy. Therefore, people of Tyre were making boatload of money because this is the busiest area where all the merchants are coming from around the world. So you hear the story here in the very beginning, right? In chapter 23, it says, "Whale of ships of Tarshish." Where is the Tarshish? Where's the Tarshish? Does anyone know where Tarshish is? Have you ever heard about Tarshish anywhere in the Bible? No? These names are not really familiar, right? But you know this story very well. So let's take a look at. Let's go to Jonah. Jonah. Book of Jonah. Chapter 1. We're going to read from verse 2. "Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Now you know where Tarshish is? You know this place, Tarshish, because when Jonah received the commands from the Lord, right? Prophecy from the Lord. Where did Jonah wanted to go? Tarshish. Where did God tell Jonah to go? Nineveh is what God told Jonah to go. But instead, he went opposite of Nineveh. So where is the Tarshish? Tarshish, we don't know exactly where this place is, But many of the people believe that Tarshish is Spain. Spain. So at that time, in ancient day, people believed that Tarshish is the ends of the earth. That's where people believed that that's the like farthest place that you could ever go. That's why people always mentioning Tarshish, because that's the ends of the earth. Because back then people did not know the earth is round, right? So that many people believe that Tarshish is the farthest end of the earth. So when you hear the Tarshish, it's like the farthest area that people come. So that means everywhere is coming. So Tarshish, when you hear this, O ships of Tarshish, so from far end of the world, they come to this Tyre to do trades. So everyone came to this place to trade, right? So there's lots of gold, lots of money was flowing into Tarshish. So it became so rich city. When people become rich, what is the most things that happens? When city becomes so rich, what happened? Well, obviously, they're not really people of Israel, first of all, right? Yeah, they got everything they need. So what do they do with that money they have? When they become so rich, they don't know what to do about this money and their richness. The first thing that happened is prostitution. Because all this, the sea people coming in for trade. So prostitution, it become very popular, right? And also, obviously, drinking alcohols and wines, because they import and they trade the most expensive, right, wines, right? All kinds of things are coming in. So people become so rich and they corrupt themselves. That's exactly what happened to Tyre. They become so proud. Why? Because all the money in the world is coming into Tyre. People have to come to this place, right? So people adore to come to live in a Tyre because this is a so rich city. So back then, in ancient time, Tyre is very, very important city that people come. Not only, for trade, but also just like trying to get some business out of it. So they became so powerful. So you have to understand the background of why the Sidon and Tyre is in the story of the Bible. The reason that I actually emphasize and spending time explaining about Tyre and Sidon is because this is something that you need to understand. And I will explain why. Coming back to Isaiah again. So verse 2, it says, "Be still, O inhabitants of the coast. The merchants of Sidon who crossed the sea have filled you, and so many waters. Your revenue was the grain of Shihor, the harvest of the Niles. You were the merchants of the nations." So you understand what this means. So they became the city where all the monies are flowing into. So they became proud, right? And what does Bible say? And so many waters, your revenue was the grain of a Shihor. But, verse 6, cross over to Tarshish, wail, O inhabitants of the coast, in this your exultant city. So they're so happy because there's so much money coming in and flowing into the city. They're so, happy living in. whose origin is from day of old, whose defeat carried her to settle far away. Who has purposed this against Tyre and bestower of crowns, whose merchants were princes, whose traders were honored of the earth? The Lord of hosts has purposed it to defile the pompous pride of all glory, to dishonor all the honors of the earth. When you actually go back to Isaiah chapter 14 for a second. Isaiah chapter 14. When you go back to Isaiah chapter 14, it talks about something interesting. It talks about the king of Babylon who went to shore. So read from the verse 11 through verse 15. It talks about the fallen cherub, which is evil. When God was referencing the fallen cherub, which is the evil one, he referenced as the king of Babylon who went to shore. So, referencing point of evil one is the king of Babylon. And I mentioned Babylon is a reference in the Bible as not only just the country, but also as the kingdom of evil. That's why you hear the Babylon, the fall of Babylon in the Revelation. Okay? And now, this time, I want you to go to Ezekiel chapter 26. I'm not going to go into too much details because we're not covering as Ezekiel, but let's just touch upon it. Ezekiel chapter 26. When you go to Ezekiel chapter 26, what you will find here is the judgment against the Tyre. You will see a lot more details of the judgment of Tyre. A lot of details. All right, so we're going to just read a few verses here. In the 11th year, on the first day of the month, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, because Tyre said concerning Jerusalem, Aha, the gate of the people is broken. It has swung open to me. I shall replenish now that she is laid waste. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Tyre, and will bring up many nations against you, as the sea brings up its wave. They shall destroy the walls of Tyre and break down her towers. I will scrape her soil from her and make her a bare rock. She shall be in the midst of the sea a place for the spreading of nets. For I have spoken, declared the Lord God, and she shall become plunder for the nations, and her daughters of the mainland shall be killed by the sword. Then they will know that I am the Lord. So, God is talking about God is against the Tyre, and he's going to destroy them. So he continues to talk about God is going to destroy the Tyre. Okay? Now, when you flip the page at 27, continue on about the fall of Tyre. And then up to 28 continues to talk about the king of Tyre. So there are almost 3 chapters is been spent in book of Ezekiel talking about the fall of Tyre. What's so big deal about the Tyre? That Ezekiel and Isaiah spent so much time and writings about the fall of Tyre. So when you actually flip the page and go to chapter 28, we're going to read a few things here. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, say to the prince of Tyre, Thus says the Lord God, because your heart is proud, and you have said, I am God. I sit in the seat of the gods, in the heart of the seas, yet you are but a man and no God. Though you make your heart like the heart of God, you are indeed wiser than Daniel. No secret is hidden from you. By your wisdom and your understanding, you have made wealth for yourself, and have gathered gold and silver into your treasures. By your great wisdom in your trade, you have increased your wealth, and your heart has become proud in your wealth. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, because you make your heart like the heart of God, therefore, behold, I will bring foreigners upon you, a most ruthless of the nations. And they shall draw their sword against the beauty of your wisdom, and defile your splendor. They shall thrust you down into the pit, and you shall die the death of the slain in the heart of the seas. Will you still say, I am a God? In the presence of those who killed you, though you are but a man and no God. In the hands of those who slay you, you shall die in the death of the uncircumcised by the hand of the foreigners. For I have spoken, declared the Lord God. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, raise lamentations over the king Tyre, and say to him, Thus says the Lord God, you are the secret of perfections, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You are in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. Sardius, topaz, diamonds, beryl, onyx, and jasper, sapphires, emeralds, and carbuncle, and crafted in gold were your settings and your engravings. On the day that you were created, they were prepared. Your anointed cherub, guardian cherub, I placed you. You were you were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of a fire you walked. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till unrighteousness was found in you. Is this something familiar to you? You should be. Why? This particular story is about the fallen cherub. How the evil one became evil. Remember many of the questions the kids or even adults ask? Why did God create evil? Why did God create Satan? Isn't that something that you hear all the time? Or you yourself ask that question? Why did God create Satan? Did God create a Satan? No. God never created a Satan. What did God create? Cherub. And because of his own beauty, because of his own wisdom, because of his own perfection, he himself wanted to become God. He wanted to raise his throne above God. And God would throw him into the pit. But now, what's interesting is God is referencing this fallen cherub, which is the evil one, referenced as the king of Tyre. All the story that you read in chapter 28 is about Tyre. But while he was talking about the Tyre, and he switched the subject and he started talking about the evil one. Huh? So what he's saying is, he's mapping evil as the king of Tyre. You get this, the story? So, in the Bible, the king of Babylon, king of Tyre, is both referenced as the king of evil. So these two countries, Tyre, Babylon, are the referencing point for evil. That's why the fall of Tyre is important in the Bible. Why? The fall of Babylon, fall of Tyre, referencing the fall of the evil one. So coming back to Isaiah once again. Coming back to chapter 3 of Isaiah. We're going to read from verse 14. Wail, O ships of Tarshish, for your stronghold is laid waste. In that day, what day? What does that mean, in that day? That's the judgment day. In that day, Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years like the days of one king. At the end of the 70 years, it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the prostitute. What is it? It is the prostitute. The Tyre is the prostitute. Take a harp, go about the city, a forgotten prostitute. So, Tyre equals prostitute. Right? When you go back to verse 3, and so many waters, your revenue was the grain of a Shihor, the harvest of Niles. You were the merchant of the nations. So there, all the trades are coming in, and through this many waters, this is where the Tyre is. It's on the water, right? Now, let's go to Revelation this time. Revelation. We're going to take a look at chapter 17, Revelations chapter 17. Revelations chapter 17. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters. So you hear the 2 things here. What do you hear? Prostitute. What do you hear? The prostitute is on the waters. Many waters. Which I just mentioned. This prostitute is the evil one. Okay? It was on the many waters. And God is going to destroy this. And then, verse 5. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon, the great mother of a prostitute and earth abominations. So, what you see here, this prostitute has 2 attributes. She's on the many waters, and on her forehead, it's named Babylon. So what you see here is you hear about the Tyre, you hear about the Babylon together, combined. And it is prostitute, which God will judge at the end. You understand what you see, the linkage between the Babylon and Tyre and prostitute and how God judged this prostitute at the end? All right, since we're not talking about Revelations, coming back to Isaiah again. So now you understand why in the prophecies that this Tyre was referenced as the prostitute, why she's in the many waters. So, historically, Tyre was attacked by many countries. Assyrian attacked the Tyre, and when you read Ezekiel chapter 28, that was around the time when Jerusalem is about to fall, about destroyed. What happened was Babylonians attacked Tyre for 13 years. 13 years. And then, later on, in BC 332, someone destroyed a Tyre. Who did that? Does anyone know? Who destroyed the Tyre? Obviously, unless you're very interested in, human history, you will probably not know this. Alexander the Great is the one who destroyed the Tyre. So, let me show you this again. Remember I showed you the map of Tyre? Not this. Let me try it again. Okay, here we go. You see this map? Now, remember that Tyre was a small island? What does it look like to you? Is that an island to you? It's no longer an island. Do you know who did this? This is what Alexander did. Alexander tried to attack the Tyre, and there were resistance, and Alexander was so mad. What he did was, you know what? Build a path. Build a path to the island. So he put the sand. He actually made artificial path from the land all the way to the Tyre. 2 paths. That's how Alexander's army just waded through the Tyre and destroyed them, killed them, and sold them to as a slaves. And after that, they just built on those 2 paths that Alexander built. They just started to make this, part. So they grow this and then made it as a big part of the land. Is no longer a marine city anymore. Let me show you some of the pictures of the Sidon. So all they have is now is the glory of the old days, ancient days. You don't hear Tyre or you don't hear Sidon. Nobody really knows where Tyre or Sidon is these days, right? Unless you read in the Bible, nobody cares. Nobody knows where that Tyre and Sidon is. So all this, the fallen, fortress, the glory of the cities in old ancient days, this is what it looks like now. Oops. This is Tyre. So you can see in old ancient day, it was a glorious day. So you can tell in an ancient day, it was a really big cities. And now this. So, coming back, Isaiah. So, when you think about chapter 23, you need to be able to link between evil city or the evil. And also be able to actually connect Isaiah and also Ezekiel and also Revelations. Why the story is the way it looks. So, even Jesus mentions about the Tyre and Sidons few times. So let's take a look at book of Luke, chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. We're going to read from verse 1. After this, Lord appointed 72 others and sent them on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. And then scroll all the way down. We're going to read from verse 10. But whenever you enter a town and they do not receive you, go into its street and say, even the dust of your town that clings to our feet we wipe off against you. Nevertheless, know this, that the kingdom of God has come near. I tell you, it will be more bearable on that day for Sidon than for that town. Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago, sitting in sackcloth and ashes. So what is Jesus saying? This Tyre and Sidon is like most evil city compared against what other cities? Sodom and Gomorrah. Jesus is saying Sodom and Gomorrah, Tyre and Sidon is almost the same. So now you understand what the Tyre and Sidon means in the Bible. Let's come back to Isaiah chapter 24 this time. So eventually, God will destroy the Tyre and Sidon, and it was destroyed. Chapter 24, Isaiah. Behold, the Lord will empty the earth and making it desolate, and he will twist its surface and scatter its inhabitants. So, what is God will do? He will empty the earth and make it desolate, and he will twist its surface and scatter its inhabitants. Inhabitants of the earth will be destroyed. Why? Because, going back to the same thing what I just mentioned in Revelations, when God pours the wrath, which is the 7 bowls he poured onto the earth, those are the bowls that God pours on earth to destroy the inhabitants of the earth. And it shall be, as with the people, so with the priest, as with the slave, so with his master, as with maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the sellers, as with the lender, so with the borrowers, as with the creditors, so with the debtor. The earth shall be utterly empty and utterly plundered, for the Lord has spoken this word. When God pours the wrath on earth, what happened? There is no differences between slave and a master, maid and mistress, buyers and sellers, lender and borrower, creditors and debtors. That'll become the same. There's no high and low. Everything will become equal. There's no differentiation between each. So he's going to make it everything the same as it was before from the beginning. The earth moans and withers. The world languish and wither. The highest people of the earth languish. Earth lies defiled under its inhabitants. For they have transgressed the law, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. Verse 5 is important to remember. Why the earth is destroyed? For this reason. What is the reason? For they have transgressed the law, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. Those are the reason why the earth is destroyed at the end. Therefore, a curse devours the earth, and its inhabitants suffer for their guilt. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are scorched, and few men are left. This is when it's going to happen. As I mentioned, this is the double prophecies. The first prophecy was what? How the Tyre and Sidon and all the surrounding country, the inhabitants of the earth, will be destroyed by the Babylonians. That was the first prophecy, was fulfilled. What is the second prophecy will be fulfilled? At the end time. How earth will be destroyed. So then, at that time, when the judgment day comes, what will happen? Verse 7, wine moans, vine languishes, all the merry-hearted sigh, the mirth of the tambourine is stilled, the noise of the jubilant has ceased, the mirth of the lyre is stilled. No more do they drink wine with singings. Strong drink is bitter to those who drink it. The wasted city is broken down. Every house is shut up so that none can enter. There is an outcry in the streets for lack of wine. All joys have grown dark. The gladness of the earth is banished. Desolation is left in the city. The gates are battered into ruins. For though it shall be in the midst of the earth among the nations, as when an olive tree is beaten, as yet the gleaning, when the grapes harvest is done, they lift up their voices, they sing for joy over the majesty of the Lord, they shout from the west. Therefore, in the east give glory to the Lord, in the coastlands of the seas give glory to the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. From the ends of the earth we hear songs of praise, of glory to the righteous one. When things were destroyed, you have to understand, on the judgment day, two things are happening. Non-believer, whoever did not trust in the Lord, whoever not participate in the salvation, for them is what? It's a judgment day. This is a horrible day. This is darkest day for the inhabitants of the earth. On the other hand, for the believers who trusted in the Lord, participated in the salvation, what is that day? The day of the celebrations, the day of the salvations, the day of joy. So there's two distinctive. On the same day, on the judgment day, one side of the people, which is the people who participate in the salvation, will filled with joy and happiness and gladness. On the other hand, for the inhabitants who denied God, who did not believe in Jesus Christ, who did not participate in the salvation, for them, this is the worst day of the day. That's the darkest day of their earth. So there's two distinctive days. So one is a completely joy is gone. So they thought this day, the joyous day, will last forever, because when they were so rich, they think, oh, we got everything. We don't have to do anything. We can enjoy our life. We don't need God. For those people, when the judgment day comes, they are completely wiped out and ruined. Whereas the people who trust in the Lord will now enter into the rest. And we're having a joy with the Lord. So, verse 16 says, from the ends of the earth we hear songs of praise. Which side of the people? Is that the people who are destroyed or people who are enjoying with the Lord? Those are the people who are enjoying with the Lord, which is people who participated in the salvation. And what do? We hear songs of praise, of glory to the righteous one. What righteous one? Who is the righteous one? Obviously, Jesus. Righteous one is the Jesus. But I say, I waste away, woe to me. So now this, the other side, the people who are destroyed and judged, woe to me. For the traitors have betrayed. With betrayals, the traitors have betrayed. Terror and the pit and the snare are upon you, O inhabitants of the earth. He who flees at the sound of the terror shall fall into the pit, and who climbs out of the pit shall be caught in the snare. So they thrown into the pit. So some will try to crawl up, try to get out of the pit. Once they came out of the pit, they thought, oh, I finally came out of the pit. But they will be trapped into the snare. What does that mean? You will never get out of that place. You will be completely judged, is what he's saying. And he who climbs out of the pit shall be caught in the snare. For the windows of heaven are open, and the foundations of the earth tremble. Earth is utterly broken. The earth is split apart. Earth is violently shaken. Earth staggers like drunken man, swayed like a hut. Its transgression lies heavy upon it, and it falls and will not rise again. What does that mean? What does that mean? You will be completely destroyed. When does this happen? As I mentioned, when you go back to the Revelations, when God pours the wrath bowls on earth, that's when this happens. So this story, you can reference it as when you go back to Revelations. Is starting from chapter 16. The 7 bowls of God's wrath will be poured down. So let's take a look at chapter 16 from Revelations. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple telling the 7th angel, go, pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God. So the first angel went and poured out his bowls on the earth, and harmful and painful sores came upon the people who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of corpse. And every living thing died that it was in the sea. The third angel poured out his bowls into the rivers and into springs of waters, and they became blood. And I heard the angel in charge of the waters says, just are you, O Holy One, who is and who was, for you brought these judgments, for they have shed the blood of the saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve. And I heard the altar saying, yes, Lord God, the Almighty, true and just are your judgments. The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was allowed to scorch people with fire. They were scorched by the fierce heat, and they cursed the name of God who had power over these plagues. They did not repent and give him glory. So even with judgment, for those of the people who are remained on earth, what do? Do they repent? No, they don't repent. What do? They curse out the Lord. Continues on. When you read this entire the story of the chapter 16, that's the wrath. That's the wrath that God pours down on earth, the inhabitants of the earth, how they will be destroyed and judged. Coming back. Verse 21 from Isaiah chapter 24. On that day, what is that day? Judgment day, I said. The Lord will punish the host of heaven in heaven and the kings of the earth on earth. They will be gathered together as prisoners in a pit. They will be shut up in a prison, and after many days they will be punished. Then the moon will be confounded, and the sun ashamed. For the Lord of hosts reigns on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and his glory will be before his elders. So this is the judgment day, and when things were punished and judged, and one side I mentioned, that's the worst day of the earth, and the other side, for the believer, that's the joyous day of the earth. Chapter 25. O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will praise your name, for you have done wonderful things. So which side of the people are saying this? The people who participate in the salvation. So if the chapter 24 was talking about mostly on the other side, which is the inhabitants of the earth, who will be judged, who will suffer from the judgment day, now chapter 25 is telling the story of the other side who participate in God's salvation. They will praise the Lord and say wonderful things that God has done. Plans formed of old, faithful and sure. This was the plan from all days. It's not something that he just all of a sudden he started planning. No, this was a plan long time ago. When is that long time ago? Before the earth was created. This is before the earth was created. This was planned. How he will judge. For you have made the city of a heap, the fortified city of ruin. A foreigner's palace is a city no more. It will never be rebuilt. For city, the people built by the power of a man, they proclaim that they say, we can do what God can do, so we don't need God. I can do things my own power and my own will. I can build. I can build a city. I can gain the wealth. I can do everything without God's help. And at the end, it will be completely ruined and destroyed. Therefore, strong people will glorify you. Cities of ruthless nations will fear you. For you have been a stronghold to the poor. Pay attention. He's the stronghold of the rich. Stronghold of the pride? No. Stronghold of the poor. What does that mean, poor? What does that mean, poor? Take a look at Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. Seeing the crowd, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciple came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for there is the kingdom of heaven. Now you hear what that poor means. What does that mean? Poor in spirit. What does that mean, poor in spirit? Poor in spirit means the people who claims, I cannot do anything by myself. I don't have any power. I don't have any wisdom. I don't have any, understanding. Lord, I need your help to do anything. For those who surrender, those who raise their hand and saying, Lord, I cannot do anything, but through you, Lord, I can do everything. Because you're the one who gives me the strength and wisdom and knowledge that I need to do what I need to do, Lord. So, what does that mean? What does that mean? This is what you have to remember. Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4. We're going to read from verse 10. I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at strength you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed a concern for me. This is the Paul, he's speaking. But you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situations I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound in any and every circumstances. I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hungers, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. What did he learn? He realized, I cannot do anything, but I can do everything who strengthens me. Remember, we cannot do anything. We're just like a dust of the earth. We can't do anything with our own ability, with our own power. But you have to understand one important thing. Yes, we're worthless. We're like a dust of the earth. We can't do anything. But at the same time, I can do everything because the one who has the power gives me the strength so that I can do everything. Not because I am powerful, not because I can, because he who strengthened me, because of him, I can do everything. As I mentioned, if you try to love someone, your enemies, if you try to be patient, if you try to be glad, if you try to be gentle and kindness, you will fail if you try to do with your own power. But I told you, through the power of the Holy Spirit, who gives you the strength, you can love, you can forgive, you can be patient, you can be kind and gentle. Is that because of your power? No, because of the one who gives you the power to do so. This is what I'm talking about. So God is the stronghold of the poor who rely on him sorely, who come to the Lord and say, I cannot do everything. Lord, I need your help. They're the one who gets the help. The people who claim themselves, I can do everything by myself without God's help, you are not going to get any help from the Lord because there's no room for God to do anything. You're not giving any room for him. You need to give him the room so that he can do the work for you, not you can do the work for yourself. If you say, Lord, get out of my way, I will drive my life, you're going to run into a problem. But if you say, Lord, you be the driver, I'll sit on the passenger side. I will go wherever you take me. You will be in peace. So that's the difference. Whether you drive or let the Lord drive you. Coming back to Isaiah again, chapter 25, verse 4 again. For you have been a stronghold to the poor, a stronghold to the needy in his distress, a shelter from the storms and shade from the heat, for the breath of the ruthless is like a storm and against the wall. So, no matter what situation's in, just like the Paul confessed, no matter what situations we're in, we should not be afraid. Why? Because he will be the stronghold, because he will be the shelter. So, remember the story of Peter. When Jesus walked on the water, Peter said, and all the disciples were shocked. Something is coming towards him. What is this? Is that some kind of ghost? And what did Jesus say? It is I. It is I. And what did Peter say? If it is you, Lord, let me come to you. So, when Peter walked on the water, what happened? Was he able to walk on the water? Did Peter walk on the water? Yes, absolutely. He walked on the water. How was he able to walk on the water? When he was looking at Jesus, he was able to walk. But what happened? And then, when he started to saw the wave, that's when he fell. Is that correct? Let's take a look at that story. Matthew chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14. We're going to read from verse 25. And in the fourth watch of night he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." So what did he see? Initially, he saw Jesus. When he saw Jesus, when he put his focus and when he's put his eyes on the Lord, on Jesus, he was able to walk on the water. But soon after he was turning his focus on the wave and the wind, he was worrying about, what is this? Soon he changed the focus, then he fell on the water. This is the focus I'm talking about. If you put your focus on Jesus, you're okay. Soon after you actually put your focus against the Lord, away from the Lord, that's where you fall. Because you don't trust the Lord. That's what happened to us. Now, coming back, chapter 25, Isaiah. Verse 5. Like the heat in a dry place, you subdue the noise of the foreigners, as a heat by the shade of a cloud. So the song of the ruthless is put down. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all people a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, of rich food full of marrow, of aged wine, well refined. And he will swallow up on this mountain the covering that is cast over all people, the veil that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord will wipe away tears from all faces, and the reproach of his people he will take away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. You hear the story of the king invited to the banquet, right? The parables of the banquet, that there's the king invited the people to the banquet, and some people said when he sent out all the servant to invite them over, and what the people say? "Oh, I'm busy. I have to go to, I have to get married. I have to actually go to to buy the animals. I have to work, blah, blah, blah. So they were not coming to the feast. When the servant came back and reported to the master, and they said, they're now coming back. No, not coming back. They're not coming to the banquet. And the king said, then go out to the street and invite everyone. So they went out to the street and invited the people to the banquet. Remember that story? So, people who were not initially invited now came to the banquet. So the people who are invited, who are they? Israelite. The people who came from the street, who were not initially invited, who are they? Gentiles, like us, who participate in the banquet. Right? So that at the end, we're going to participate in the banquet. What is that banquet, by the way? What is that banquet? Do you know? What is that banquet? Let's go to Revelation. Everything is tied into Revelation. Revelation chapter 21. Revelation chapter 21. We're going to read from verse 1. Then I saw a new heaven and new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth has passed away, and the sea was no more. You see, what's no more? Sea is no more. What is the sea? Many water. It's gone. What does that many water represent? Death and evil one is what that is. So there's no more seas. Continue on. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down of the heavens, and God prepare as a bride adorned for her husband. So what is that banquet? This is the time that Jesus is a groom, and the church of the bride is now getting married. That's what that banquet is for. Continue on. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and the God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be moaning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. Does it sound familiar to you? That's exactly what we just read in Isaiah, doesn't it? That's the last banquet that we participate. That's the wedding day of between Jesus and the church. Going back to the story of Genesis, God created Adam. God took the bones from Adam and he made a woman and brought together. What did God say? What did God say? This is something we just keep repeating week after week. Genesis chapter 2. Verse 21 and on. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to him fall upon man, and while he slept, took one of his rib and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God has taken from the man, he made it into a woman and brought her to a man. Then the man said, "At this is last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And a man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed." So Adam and woman, as soon as the woman was created, God brought them together and said, what? United as one. United as one. Right? So they're like getting married again. They became one again. What happens at the banquet? They married. Now two, Jesus and the church became one again. That's the story. So going back to one again, unification of Christ. That's what happened at the end. Coming back to Isaiah chapter 25. I'm just going to read one more time. Verse 6 and on. On the mountain the Lord of hosts will make for all people the feast of rich food, feast of well-aged wine, a rich food full of marrow, of aged wine well refined, this is the wedding day between Jesus and the church, right? And he will swallow up on his mountain and covering that is cast over all people, the veil that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever. Death is gone now. And the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces, as we just read from Revelation chapter 21. And the reproach of his people he will take away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. It will be said on that day, is a wedding day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him that he might save us. This is the final day of our salvation. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. Let us be glad and rejoice in his salvations. For the hand of the Lord will rest on this mountain. Now, finally, we get into his rest. This is the final rest that we're getting into. And Moab shall be trampled down in his place, and the straw is trampled down in the dunghill. And he will spread out his hands in the midst of it, as a swimmer spread his hands out to swim. But the Lord will lay low his pompous pride together with the skills of his hands. And the height of fortifications of his walls he will bring down, lay low, and cast to the ground to the dust. The people who proud, people say that I can do it myself. Well, I can swim. You throw into the water, don't worry, I can swim myself. But what does God do? He's going to put his thumb pressing him down. You can't swim. You're going to be dead. Right? They're trying, I can swim out of this water. Yeah? It's like, okay, I'm going to push you down. The people who just so prideful, they were came up so high, I can do myself. I just try to raise my throne above God. What happened? I'm going to pull you down and then bring you back to the dust as you were. So, this is the part that we have to remember. We came from the earth, the dust of the earth. We are the dust of the earth. Can dust of the earth can do anything? No. This is why you need and I need Jesus, because I cannot do anything without his help. I am the branch, he is the vine. The branch needs to be attached to the vine to produce the fruit. That's the lessons. So, you can see the judgment, you can see the salvation. This story, literally, entire Bible is talking about the same story over and over and over. You may actually think that I'm actually giving you a new story and new perspective. At the end of the day, I'm saying the exactly same thing about Jesus Christ, his salvations, and the people who trusted in the Lord will be saved. That's all I'm saying. You may hear something new every week, but that's exactly what I'm saying week after week, because that's what Bible is about. There's nothing else. As if I'm actually turning a different page and, covering different books, but the same story over and over and over. Once again, why is he just to keep repeating himself over and over and over? Why are we reading as a new story all the time? This is how God is actually trying to explain to us. He explained to us, this is it. You're a sinner. You're not capable to do anything. Because you're a sinner, you're going to die. But I want to save you. Whoever believes in me will be saved. Did you get it? I don't understand what that means. Okay, let me explain again. He's just explaining with a different example. Same story. He gives the same exact story with the different examples. Did you get it? No, I don't understand. Okay. All right, let me explain again. He just giving different example, same story. And he does it 1,000 times. And he asking the same question. Did you get it? The people are saying, I still don't understand. This is why this Bible became so thick. This is why our Bible became so thick. He's giving so many different examples, but saying the same exact story. Literally, I'm giving you the same story over and over again. Until at this point, for those of you who have heard all the lessons and the sharing of my Bible, am I saying anything different? It's the same story. It's about time for you to say, like, Key, stop saying what you're saying. I'm sick and tired of you saying the same thing over and over again. But that's what Bible is saying. There's no other story. So, hope you can get the story. All right. We don't have time to go to chapter 26, so we're going to cover up to chapter 25 today. Any questions so far? Or any things that we discussed or the things that we talked about? Sure.